Ọba ẹwà èdògè ni o. Bí kẹ́nẹ́kẹ́nẹ́ máa dẹ́yọ̀. Ọ̀rọ̀ adébú mọ́dì ànáwẹ̀. Kúrà tọ́ gbèjì.
In 1861, colonialism set foot in Nigeria, but just before colonialism, there existed in Nigeria a kingdom like no other, a kingdom blessed by the gods, one that was rich in culture and history, standing tall and towering above neighboring kingdoms and basking in its own wealth of knowledge, political organization, and traditional civilization. Long before colonialism, there was the great Benin Kingdom and its indefatigable people, led by an unbroken line of invincible and formidable kings, known as Obas. Benin City lies on a high sandy plain to the north of the Niger Delta in Edo State, Nigeria. The Benin Kingdom was very sovereign, under no form of control whatsoever. It was a kingdom that survived based on law and statutes and its own internal dynamics. Benin was famous for its rich artistic traditions, especially in bronze casting. Minerals, gum copal, gum arabic, palm oil and kernels were found in large quantities. It had a unique urban landscape of royal palaces, mud brick residential houses, mausoleum, ancestral altars, courtyards, artisan workshops, administrative and religious buildings, compounds, pavements, and sacred trees. The streets were long and broad, and there were markets twice a day where they sell cows, cotton, elephant's teeth, European merchandise, and whatever the kingdom produced. The houses were large with clay walls, and at a distance from each other, they were covered with reeds, straw, and leaves. The Oba, the ruler of the people, was almighty, absolute, the defender of his people, and a warrior. He could summon 100,000 fighting men to battle. The Oba was the hub around which the socio-economic, religious, and political activities of the kingdom rotated. The sacrosanctity of his palace and throne echoed to other neighboring communities. The words of the imperial Obas were law. They acted as chief justice in the kingdom. Succession to the throne of the Oba of Benin was primogeniture. The first son of the Oba became the Oba after he passed on. The great people of the Benin kingdom lived in peace and harmony until a license to commit a mass atrocity, cruelty, and cultural democide emerged through the idea of white projection. The sacking of the Great Benin Kingdom by the British in February 1897 was an attack on human life, culture, belief, art, and sovereignty. It was an attack that was part of a much bigger event, during which the East and West African campaign was a crucial theatre of war. A long British Infinity War to establish systems of governance involving the periodic removal of kings, armies, and whole human landscapes of towns and villages. A series of events that we may now refer to as World War Zero.
And I'm the curator of National Museum in Benin City. Benin Kingdom, the original people known as the Benin were known as people of the land of Igodomigodo. And they were ruled by the Ogiso between 40 BC and up to 1100 AD. There were about 30 of them, or thereabouts. A key prominent Ogiso was Ogiso Ere, who was the second. The first one was Igodo, while the second Ogiso was Ogiso Ere. I'm bringing him out because during his reign, a lot of things happened in Benin. We're told that by the time he died, he left Benin much, much better than he met it. So much so that blacksmithing was introduced into Benin. We all know the importance of that. So after the Ogiso era, which ended with Ogiso Owodo, the story is well known that he had a son, a Kaladiran, and Kaladiran was supposed to have been killed, but the servants left him. Instead of murdering him, they left him to wander into the wilderness. And he went as far as to present-day Ile-Ife. That's the story, that's our story. And when he passed on, we had a period of interregnum that the Benin had to seek help from Ile-Ife, at least because they knew that one of their forebears, the Kaladiran, had founded Ile-Ife and become king then as Oduduwa. So subsequently, during that interregnum and the seeking of help from the Benin, because after Owodo, we had Ogiame was warming up to take over from the father. So Kaladera, that's Oduduwa now sent his son Oromia to come down to Benin. So Oromia came and impregnated the Benin princess, who gave birth to the one who became Oba Eweka the first, and that began the Oba dynasty, that's the second dynasty. And Oromia is reputed to be the first Oba in that line of dynasty.
During the period of the Obas, Benin was expansionist and at the apogee of its glory. The kingdom extended to far-flung areas, including neighboring cities and even countries. The Great Kingdom of Benin had its first interactions with foreigners in 1472, when the Portuguese first set foot in the kingdom.
My name is Aiko Ogobaifo, custodian, Institute for Benin Studies. When Portugal came to Benin in 1472, the first Portuguese European that came to Benin, that's Roy de Secura. The intention then was probably for amalgamation, that is to want to include Benin with some other areas like they have done in Congo and they have done in Angola, and perhaps to take Benin as a subject. But by the time they got here, they realized that Benin was not of that caliber to be taken. So the best they did was to involve diplomatic relations.
The Benin Kingdom already had political structures that could rival those of other developed countries. The Portuguese decided to engage in diplomatic relations with the kingdom. They settled for trade and commerce, starting with pepper, the BINI cloth, and palm oil. The Portuguese has a great relationship with Oba Esigye. It is recorded in the Roman Catholic records of BINI interaction that Oba Esigye was baptized in 1504.
This mutual understanding and respect continued till about 1504, when the Capuchins claimed to have been sent by the Pope to come and evangelize. And they were here for a whole year. They went to war with Esigye, who was the Oba then, the war against the Ida that Benin was at that time prosecuting. And that is where the personage of Idia came strongly into Benin history. Idia was the mother of Oba Esigye. She participated in that war, and it was the first time that Benin had it in history that a woman would ever go to war. The Portuguese, when they arrived, they discovered that the Oba was prosecuting a war, and they went to meet him at the war front. Though they were not active fighters, at least they were there as friends and gave moral encouragement to Oba Esigye. At the end of that war, they all came to Benin, and it is recorded in the Roman Catholic records of Benin interaction that the Oba Esigye was baptized in 1504. This war I'm talking about was 1515 and 1516. So by the time they got back to Benin, it was reasonably expected that the Portuguese would consider Oba Esigye as one of theirs, having been baptized. So Esigye and other kings that came after him, they became known in Benin history as the warrior kings. That is when exactly that Benin kingdom expanded to its highest limits, because they now had the opportunity of firearms, which was rare in this part of the world as at that time.
In 1861, colonialism set foot in Lagos, Nigeria. At this time, the Benin Kingdom was still very sovereign and under no control whatsoever.
Genitor was the consistent means of succession in Benin, just as we have in England. So I wanted to take note of that. So Benin was the only kingdom that shared that similarity and commonality with the English monarchy, where there too, succession to the throne was based on primogeniture. But in their own case, it doesn't matter whether it is male or female. That is why you have the queen. So the anthem says, God saves the queen. The king comes in, it changes to God saves the king. But in Benin, it is the male child that succeeds the father. Equally, the Obas of Benin, towards the end of that century, was Ovora Ogbaisi.
The Benin Kingdom survived based on law and statutes and their own internal dynamics. Conquered territories paid tributes to the Benin Kingdom, and the Europeans apparently had their reservations concerning this.
So when it came to the time of Ovora and the British were now having interest in expanding their own coast, because the international diplomatic circles have subdivided Africa among the European powers, and Benin happened to have fallen within the area later known as Nigeria. The British knew that with the existence of Benin, it would be almost impossible for them to take powers exclusively. So what they did was to come up with a treaty in 1892 that Benin should sign a treaty. Although it is recorded that Ovora did not sign a treaty, the British claimed he signed. Therefore, when the British came calling on Benin in 1896 that they wanted to visit the palace of the Obas of Benin, emissaries were sent to them that the Oba was involved in traditional ceremonies, festivals that last almost 6 months. But at that particular time, they told them that the Oba wasn't in a position to receive visitors. The British, because they have already premeditated and pre-planned their invasion, insisted on coming into Benin. And some of the chiefs, those who are generals, whose responsibility it is to defend the kingdom, considered this an abomination, and they attacked the British column. The British column that included 9 Europeans, 250 carriers, and 280 armed soldiers. Although the British claimed that they were not soldiers, that they were friends, and they were just coming for friendly visit, it was obvious that they were coming for an attack. Because again, Jaja Fopobo had been removed few years before that. So the Benin knew that if they don't defend their land, they are going to go the way of Opobo people. But again, the acting vice consul then had already written to his home office informing them that until the Oba of Benin is deposed and removed, that there was not going to be any way for the British to establish their administration. Though the Home Office was said to have asked him to tarry a little, he persisted. He was hell-bent on flouting the instructions of the Benin people. There was bound to be an altercation. The altercation occurred, and only 2 of the British officers survived. That is Locke and Bosragon. They have their own version of the story, but it is reasonably expected that people who survived that type of altercation will not be positive in their records. So that's the British aspect. But they had to convince their home office that it was the desire to stop human sacrifice that made them to invade Benin. That is what they said. But we know better now, because the letter Philip wrote was to depose, to attack Benin, remove the king, and depose him.
They knew Benin had a very rich cultural heritage, and they also knew the worth in pounds. And though it was the Benin strike force themselves who threw the first punch, they certainly weren't prepared for the kind of ripples it generated across the European army and how it set into motion forces that will bring fire to the great Benin kingdom. A ravenous wolf approached, vengeful and confident in its military prowess, savouring the meal to come. Still, this wolf was made of men and ships, rockets and gun cotton, an army of foreigners and Africans, vast beyond imagination, ready to devour the great Benin kingdom. The people were no longer at ease. War was coming, and they could feel it. It was only a matter of time now. The British government reacted by sending in the punitive force, which came to be known as Benin Punitive Expedition. They came with their army devouring every soul on their path, and with each conquest, they grew more bloodthirsty and callous. The European army was led by Admiral Sir Harry Rawson, annoyed by the notion of Benin's sovereignty, came to Benin to bring her to her knees. They went with an invading force that outnumbered the BINI army drastically. The Benin Punitive Expedition took place over 3 weeks between 9 and the 27th of February, 1897. Harry Rawson invaded the Benin Empire with a column of 1,200 British squadron comprising Royal Marines, sailors, and over 5,000 Niger Coast Protectorate forces. In addition, it is estimated that some 5,000 natives served in one form or the other, including as carriers, guides, mappers, cooks, and so on.
As paying for the cost of the war, of the invasion, the British carted away more than 5,000 pieces of bronze and ivory.
The Binis fought with what they had: Dane guns, pistols, machetes, cutlasses, spears, bows and arrows, knives, and a few ancient cannons that fired broken iron pieces. Rockets and shells razed dozens of towns and villages across this vast swathe of countryside. The Binis were ill-supplied with bullets and largely depended upon slugs. The operation cost the British £30,000. No true figures exist for the causalities. On the British side, black troops did most of the fighting and were at the front of the advances. As they fell, they simply stepped over and left where they fell. Benin causalities were hurriedly dumped in mass graves across Benin City as the people fled. It was a battle of bows and arrows against gun cottons. It was spears and Dane guns against rockets. The bows and arrows fell. All of the spears and Dane guns fell. The Europeans were an unevenly matched opponent, and the fires from their rockets reduced the Benin kingdom to a pile of dust and ashes. Shortly after British troops plundered Benin City, Consul General Moore pursued Obas of Benin into the forests, but couldn't get him. A number of chiefs were also shot dead for not betraying Obas of Benin's whereabouts. Obas of Benin, however, surrendered on August 3, 1897. Moore tried him in a kangaroo court on September 5th and sent him into exile in chains on September 13, 1897.
The British came, they saw, but some of us believed they didn't conquer, even though the history will tell you that they did, because they destroyed Benin, burnt Benin. I say so with all relish, because the primogeniture I spoke about still held sway even after Obas of Benin joined his ancestors. He was deposed in 1897 and for about 17 years taken to Calabar, during which period the British made all attempts to change the course of history, by imposing someone else as Oba outside that bloodline. Mind you, Obas of Benin had a son who was duly qualified as the crown prince to take over. But the British had come as colonialists and they had the power, they had the might. But they couldn't impose somebody outside that family. So when the Oba now joined his ancestors in 1914, they had no other option because the people resisted. The people did not have baronets, they did not have cannons, they did not have even pistol, nothing to fight anybody. But they had ingrained in their mindset the fact that the Oba was supreme and he came from that family. So they had to respect that, they had no choice. And that was why the crown prince, Prince Agobasiri, now took over as the Oba of Benin after Oba Ovoreme had joined his ancestors. The Beninese then believed that for 70 years they had an Oba who was in Calabar. And they were not ready to accept any other one here because they cannot have two Obas on the throne. So that worked for the Beninese. Yes, the British were in control of administration and all that. They couldn't do anything about that. So when he passed on, his son became Oba Eweka II in 1914. After him, his own first son, Oba Akezwa in 1933. Then after him also, Oba Ediawa in 1979. And of course, after Oba Ediawa, his own first son is now our Oba, His Royal Majesty, Oba Eweka II, Nogidigan. So you can see that we have an unbroken chain of succession. So that's why we believe that we're not conquered. Because a conquest has to be total. It wasn't total. So you could kill a man, but you cannot kill the spirit. You could kill as many people as you like, but you cannot kill their culture. You could come in and decimate buildings, flatten them, burn them, but you cannot kill the architecture. Today we still have Benin architecture all over. Fluted walls, I've forgotten the name they call it in Benin, Eken, Nabi or so, where you have the fluted walls depicting typical Benin architecture. You can't rule that one out.
The British came, saw, and didn't conquer, despite such brazen attempts at annihilating the Benin Kingdom. Even though it was buried under a pile of debris and ashes, the kingdom survived.
Our culture did not cease. Our culture was not burnt. The guilds who were given a royal charter in 12 AD by Oba Ogwola, there were about over 50 of them. They continued to ply their trade after 1887. The altars that were destroyed in the palace, Oba Eweka II rebuilt them. And all the furnishings, which most of these antiquities are used for ancestral veneration, were replaced by post-1897, antiquities.
Today, as we consider the looting of the Benin Kingdom, an attempt to create a fixed list of what was stolen is a hopeless task given the enormity of the loss and the nature of what was taken and what is still hidden. This now brings us to the question that has been burning in the hearts of Edo State indigenes, as well as citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is now 125 years since the sacking and looting of the Benin Kingdom, and the British still hold on dearly to the artifacts and bronze works that were looted from the kingdom. For many years now, they have conveniently ignored the voices of Africans and even foreigners worldwide that have continuously demanded that these looted artifacts be returned to their rightful owners.
Yes, those objects taken away represented then and still represent an ancestor that was held in captivity. Until those objects are returned, the ancestors are still abroad. But they are coming very soon. Two, when those objects were taken, they amounted to the invasion of a library. Because for us in Nigeria and Benin especially, art is not art for art's sake, but it's communicative art for utility, where the bronze caster was like a storyteller, a narrative enhancer, and part of the historians that wrote the history of our people, unknown to so many people. How did they do that? You pick any plaque and you see probably an Oba in procession. And what happens is that each time the Oba has an activity, he invites the guilds. They watch, and they go back and they produce works which the Oba commanded to do. And today we have a massive hall of such antiquities, and they were taken away. Therefore, the libraries, our own library was decimated. The return will fill that history, and the unbroken, the gaps in our history will now be replaced. The objects taken abroad, today they are called classical Benin objects, I'm sure. That adjective was made for only Roman arts. And that's because Roman art was seen as the height of art. And yet, you have these works that have just been shipped to England, and the Europeans were shocked to see the finesse with which they were made, to see the artistic genius behind their production. That they said, no, these artworks resemble that of the Romans. They must be classical and all that. They must have been produced by the Portuguese, because then they felt that we were living on trees, we lacked culture, we were brutish, we sacrificed humans. Guess who were brutish? The British were brutish. They were the ones who came and destroyed our land and destroyed the palace also. These artworks went abroad and for centuries have been helping us to tell our story. That's another thing. The artworks changed the narrative of the British, that our people were not illiterate. Rather, the bronze casters were orally literate, because it takes an intelligent man to go to his workshop and produce the type of works of art that they took abroad. We are hoping they come back.
Brass is a highly transformative material. The ability to amalgamate and cast is one source of the power of the Benin bronze. Most were cast from brass, melting down the wires and the manillas that the copper producers of Bristol, London and Liverpool traded for slaves. The Benin bronze is cast using an elaborate lost wax process. The lost wax process is started by carving beeswax or a similar substance. Then the beeswax is covered with clay. The first few layers of clay are easily moldable, and then additional layers of stronger, thicker clay are added.
See the wax design? You see the red head?
Oh, yes.
Then the clay mold containing the wax is put into the fire, and the beeswax melts and is lost. This is where the name lost wax comes from. Then the metallurgist pours brass into the clay mold, and when the mold cools, it is opened by breaking it. Many traditional bronze casters use the lost wax process to this day. The art of bronze casting is now being simplified and the labor divided to make the process faster and easier. Those who truly love art do not require any special motivation to learn the job. For some of them, it is hereditary, and for others, their love for the art prompts them to learn the art. A lot of young people still practice the art of bronze casting to this day, but the bronze casters themselves are skeptical about the future of bronze casting in Benin because of some of the inherent challenges of the job, which include the difficult and laborious processes involved, the low-income generating aspect of the job, and very importantly, the apparent lack of interest being expressed by the younger generation regarding the job.
My name is Ivory. I'm born into the Ivory family so many years ago. This art of bronze casting has been a part and parcel of the family. I can recall my great-grandfather was also involved in this art of casting. He was among those chiefs that were in the palace doing this casting job for the Obas of Benin so many years ago. I copied the art of bronze casting from my father too. Over 35 years ago, when he was doing it, I was already there watching him, also assisting him to do it. That's how I developed the love. I then got myself into casting. We were told by my father that most casting jobs those days were done in the palace. It was not done outside the palace. Except for a few people who were also doing the outside the palace, but the Oba, they were always doing it for the Obas of Benin. They go there, they cast. They present it to the Oba will give them one or two gifts in return, either food stuff or bread or anything. They will give it, present it to them. They were not doing it because of money at that time too, but there was not really money available. Now, when we got to a stage, we were told that the casting was also moved out of the palace, moved to the other sector where they were also practicing it. But later, individuals started doing it their own after the invasion in 1897 too, when most of those artifacts they carried away, were moved to overseas. That also creates awareness of the job. So the white men were now interested in it. They want to see how the job were being done. So most of them come to Africa, to Nigeria, to Benin precisely to see the way we do it. There's at that time the individuals started doing it in their various homes, not like in our house too. My grandfather was also doing it at home. My father also learned it from him. So we also met my father doing it too. We also learned it from him. Up to today, we have been into it and we enjoy doing it. We love doing it.
I'm Mr. Monday. I been in the area of Nigeria. We have been into production of bronze casting. For me, I've been into bronze casting for about more than 4 decades. I started this bronze casting and learned it from my father. My own father learned it from his son's father. I would say we are the 5th generation of bronze casting. We have been into this bronze for years. I have a statue behind there which represents my great grandfather. He was a bronze caster at the same time. He was named Chief Polago of Benin. We here in Benin, we always like to pass it on to our children, to our great grandchildren, for the industry to continue. A lot of youth in Benin, especially, they are not interested in bronze casting. They are looking at it that it's very hard, and the money is not just coming like that. They prefer to do a simple job for them to get money.
A lot of people are not interested in the job. A lot of people want to travel abroad. People want to do other things that will prepare them to get money.
One thing, government need to encourage the younger ones coming up. How would they encourage them? For us that is still in the basement, they need to give us loan for us to work. If, for example, I've been giving 10 million naira now or 200 million, take as a loan, work. They give me long time of 10 years to pay back. That is something to encourage me. It will even encourage my children and one of them to come into the business. They will see me doing well, doing everything. People will be coming. I wish we have a sponsor like government. Say, okay, if you have this good job, they have a big gallery, come and keep it there. Let's pay for you. If all those white men come, that would be okay. But there's nothing like that.
If measures are not put in place quickly, the bronze culture of Benin may go into extinction in the nearest future, just like the Ifa, Nok, and Igbo Ukewu art that have slowly become extinct.
I was sovereign in 1897, but 63 years later, Nigeria gained independence, and Benin was now part of that Nigeria, that government. And the UNESCO Convention says that all such objects that were legally taken during occupation, especially during colonialism, like the case of the British, should be returned to the countries of origin. So the objects are coming to Nigeria and be handled by the federal government when these objects come back.
Some years ago, a few of the looted artworks were returned, and it had a ripple effect on the income of these bronze casters as people began to make orders for replicas of the artworks that were returned. This can also be interpreted to mean that the more the artworks are returned, the more economically viable the business of bronze casting will be. No doubt these looted artifacts belong to the palace and the Obas of Benin, and their return cannot be overemphasized. In 1936, Oba Akenzua II made the first formal claim for restitution of the objects looted in 1897, and within 2 years 2 coral crowns and a coral bead garment that had been on loan to the British Museum were returned to him on the instruction of their owner G.M. Miller, apparently the son of a member of the Benin expedition who had previously loaned the pieces to the British Museum in 1935. The French have returned 26 pieces of Benin's artwork to Nigeria. Mark Walker returned the bronzes that were stolen by his grandfather, yet the British have resisted permanently returning the artifacts to Nigeria. When Nigeria hosted the Second World Black and African Festival of Art and Culture Festac in 1977, 80 years after the sacking of Benin City, the symbol chosen for the festival was the Queen Idia ivory mask in the British Museum, and the loan of this object from London was requested in 1974 and 1976, but refused on the grounds of its fragility. The descendants of the Benin Empire deserve much more than being allowed to borrow their history. The fact that Europeans are unable to return the bronzes to Nigerians demonstrates that they see an inherent value in keeping the looted artwork. Since the Binis produced them, it is superfluous to hold the view that they may not be able to provide safekeeping for them. They have not broken the production process since after the invasion. They currently have widely educated sculptors, art historians, anthropologists and museologists. We should be able to do more than their forefathers did. The Nigerian government continues to purchase looted objects when they appear on the open market. The governor of Edo State, Governor Obaseki, has proposed to develop a critically acclaimed museum that would sit near the King's Palace in Benin. If Europeans want to have bronzes in their museums, they should pay Nigerian artists to replicate the stolen bronzes and should display the replicas in their museums. The bronzes are more than just works of art. They tell the story of the Benin Empire. They are also an integral part of Benin's life. As a result, Benin has become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The cultural assets of the Benin Kingdom are currently located in various museums, galleries and collections all over the world, with the largest proportion at the United Kingdom and United States of America. When they are returned, it will conclude the story of the great Benin Empire. Those objects today represent an ancestor that is held in captivity. When those objects were taken, it amounted to the invasion of a library, and until those objects are returned, the ancestors remain in captivity.
Light of the nation. If I leave you, now you I go run back to you. I go run back to you. Cause we shop